Hi everyone, delonewolf here, and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. As always, we'll start with some news, and we got a new patch last week. The patch that I would say mostly revolved around the changes to the Black Ops battleships that can now take up to 30 covered ships with them in a covered jump. Pretty interesting, also a much better patch in my opinion, because CCP took their time a little bit more, put this stuff up on CC and organized a mass test, which I think was great news for the quality of the patch. CCP also announced some more changes that they're bringing to the game, and the biggest surprise to me is quite a few changes to the graphics of EVE Online that should result in much more color into the game. I'm definitely liking these changes that are on CC on the test server at this point when it comes to the ships themselves, structures, even planets and moons. It does feel like all the details are popping quite a lot more and that you've got a lot more color, but I'm gonna give that feedback here again as well. I made a video on it just yesterday. But the background for the stars themselves does start to feel a little bit too bright, too busy. I would say that just flying out into space, especially in Galente space, which is where I've made the video, it's brighter out there than it is here in the hangar of GTA 4.4. So the stars out there are creating even more light and a much denser pattern as well than what we're seeing here. For me, it feels like it's a little bit too busy. I would definitely prefer more of a dark vibe that makes space feel vast and empty and mysterious. But we will of course see it's still on CC, so definitely still subject to change. Also quickly want to touch on the numbers of players. Right, quite a few Reddit threads on the EVE Online subreddit. Talking about the declining numbers, I do still feel like most of the explanation is the triple whammy that CCP and EVE Online is experiencing at the moment. First, we had the very big rush in April, just before the industry changes of a lot of industries just pumping out as much as they could right then and there, which was naturally going to mean a little bit of a decline in interests industry and thus in general demand in the game after that point. Once the patch was deployed, this happened just before summertime, so we're being hit by the summer slump as well at the moment. And of course we're in quite a unique year where for the first time in I think almost 1.5 years we're starting to see some countries around the world reduce the limits that they put on people for what they can do, traveling, going out to eat, going to bars, meeting friends and all of that stuff. And that means that for the first time in quite a little bit of time, people have other things that they can do than sit behind their computer and play EVE Online. I think all of that is creating a sharp slump at the moment. It does tend to apparently have some people quite worried, a little bit of finger pointing at the resource scarcity, the blue donut and all of that stuff. I personally feel like, yeah, definitely give your feedback, try to do so in a constructive way, try to not just ask to CCP to roll back 2 years of efforts and patches or things like that, but you should definitely give your opinion. And it's also a choice for everyone individually, right? Whether or not you want to play EVE Online at the moment, if you're having fun or not, that's all up to you. And especially if you want to pay for your subscription at the moment, that is a personal choice that no one can make for you. I personally I'm enjoying my time in EVE Online. I would say that these difficult times tend to be a great motivator for me, because I do feel like everything that I can still manage to do in the game at the moment will very easily maintain its value, especially when more players come back, when more demand for all of the stuff starts to show up. I think that that's when your efforts through the difficult times start to even increase in value, and that you'll be very happy to have done them. But as always, this is still a game. Definitely make sure that you have fun playing the game. That I would say is the #1 thing to make sure of. And then also maybe a quick note on the marketing mishap. I do think that, if I'm not mistaken, when people lost ships, they would have a pop-up giving them the opportunity to just, with a couple of clicks, buy some plex. Not really sure how something like that gets through. Definitely something that I feel they should at least, talk to the CSM about, and that would be something where they would be able to give warning that something like that would not be received well or seen in a positive light by most of the player base. Maybe the new CSM coming into play just now will have been a bit of a part of the problem, but yeah, definitely feels like a little bit of a marketing mishap by CCP. Next up, let's take a quick look at the New Eden store as well, see what's happening here. So first of all, we get some new skins called the Panther Iceblade Gorilla skins. Definitely some more marketing stuff since they're on the Black Ops battleships that have been buffed in the patch. I must say it is a very good looking skin with the animation here, so like a power wave going through the hull of your ship. Definitely pretty unique and pretty cool. Let's take a quick look at what it looks like on the scene. Yeah, at the front of the ship going all the way to the middle here, you get a very nice wavy effect, which is pretty cool. Then we get one sale for the Nix Dos Rovner's Request skin. That one is still on sale at the time of the recording, and if we take a look at the services here, nothing special to report there. That means that we get to move on to the market. Yeah, this is take 2. I'm gonna quickly mention that, and maybe we'll get into trouble with that as well. But all of a sudden, the neighbors started drilling right next to me, so I had to abort one of the first recordings. But I'll try to push through on this one, so we'll start with Plex and stuff coming in at 640. Like that, and here we go. So this is the Plex price in Jita itself, almost 2.7 million for the sellers, 2.5 million for the buyers, but the chart I think is pretty interesting. After hesitating for about a week to go above 2.5 million, we are finally breaking through that for the average price of Plex. And so if you look at the prices, not just in Jita but in the player on Trade Hub, sellers go up to 2.6 million as well, and the buyers go up to just above 2.5 million. So the upwards pressure in Plex is definitely happening. I'm still seeing this as the market betting a little bit on inflation at the moment, and I think part of that equation is going to be the reserve keys that CCP is going to introduce into the game at some point. It should provide quite a little bit of extra ISK and extra liquidity into the game to some players that should find its way through the entire market. But this is definitely a couple of steps up from the 2.2 million ISK bottom for Plex, and so I would not be surprised if that part of the development is already being priced into the price of Plex as well. And so the impact of the actual introduction of the keys could either be very small or very short-lived as well, because this is definitely a serious increase in price over the last couple of months for Plex. After that, we've got the multiple pilot training certificates. A little bit more hesitation over the last week. Must also be said that the jump up from around 1.2 to 1.3 million was very fast here in the training certificate market. 1.3 billion, for the sellers and 1.2 billion for the buyers. We're still stuck at that 1.3 billion. I think, of course, it's a smaller market. Volumes are decreasing, so you'd need to see a little bit more movement across the board for an actual move in the average prices. But you can also see with not too many sellers, we go to up 1.32 billion, 1.35 billion, and almost 1.4 pretty quickly, which is actually the price of most of these in the Jita 4.4 station as well. Next up, the skill extractors, of course following the price of Plex very closely, with finally the next breakout apparently making its way above 290 million ISK. We're talking 294 million for the sellers, 287 million for the buyers. After that, the skill injectors, let's take a look at the impact on these. And for the large skill injectors, we are finally starting to see a change into the trend, which has basically been down for a year straight, but we have our first little bump in the road at 570 million ISK, but we see at the tail end here that we're already hesitating to really start an uptrend, which is a little bit of a surprise to me, considering what plex are doing. It's going straight up from 2.2 to 2.3 million. I would have expected a little bit more robust of a bump in the large scale injector market. You can see the 5-day moving average already moving back down together with the 20-day moving average. So this is not very good news for large scale injectors. Definitely more hesitation, I would say, on the skill point part of this item. And then we've got these small scale injectors that is showing a different picture. Definitely bounced from the 120 to 125 million range, with the 5-day moving average still having a little bit of momentum, pulling away from the 20-day moving average, selling at 117 million, buyers coming in at 111 million. Pretty much we are seeing a little bit of upwards pressure for the small scale injectors. Then we've got the daily alpha injectors that are going back down in price, able to stay above 40 million ISK, so still right around its average. 41 million for the sellers, 38.5 million for the buyers. I would say that this is the normal price for the daily alpha injectors. That's definitely again showing that it's its own unique item, and I think that even players that decide to not stick around for Omega may still be playing as daily as alpha players, will find that this is a very good item in the sense that this is an achievable goal for any new players. 40 million ISK is something that you can earn maybe in a day, maybe in a couple of days. This is not something that's going to take you weeks or months to do, and as a result I do feel like this is a hook that quite a few players are using, and thus we are seeing a decently good price of around 40 million for these daily alpha injectors. And then we've got the hypercores that shot up to 300,000 ISK all of a sudden, and that was definitely a little bit unexpected. May have looked like a little bit of a bet on pretty big inflation, but also right here at the tail end we're seeing a massive pullback down to 274,000 for the sellers and 253,000 for the buyers. So I'm going to say what I think I speculated on last week as well, that this is more tied to sort of an event or something, maybe a big group that organized sort of a raffle or something like that, requiring some extra hypercores. We got a couple days with bigger volumes. Basically, that's my read on that. I don't see this as an indication that the general market is expecting massive inflation or anything like that. Now, I do think that this is an event tied around the hypercores and the Hypernet relay itself, probably due to something very specific happening somewhere in the game. I'm not exactly aware of what that was. Next up, the minerals, but first, quick drink. Since I've actually been trying for over an hour already to make this EVE talk, but yeah, minerals coming in at 12.50. Like that, and as always we are going to start with Tritanium that is continuing its sideways track between 4 and 5 ISK. If we take a look at sellers, some sellers coming in the Tranquility Trading Tower at 4.56, and then in GTA 4.4 it's 4.72 for the sellers, 4.44 for the buyers. It's really that 4.5 ISK price range that we have to keep in mind, I think, on this one, and this is due to the industry changes that happened late April, where the need for titanium in general in industry has gone down quite substantially, where before it was pretty much that 6 ISK price range. Once you got to 6 ISK and anything above that was a sell, anything below 6 ISK was, well, maybe hold for a better price later down the line. We have to accept that titanium has gone down in need and in value in the game in general, and so I'm going to say that, yeah, that 4.5 ISK seems to be that new range where anything above that still makes sense to sell immediately, but once we go below that, we'll probably see a slowdown in supply, and it would make sense to hold on for maybe a bit of a destruction happening so that you can sell at a better price. Then we've got pyrite, which at the tail end here is showing a little bit of upwards pressure as well on some more volumes. We're talking 1823 for the sellers and 1726 for the buyers. I would say here for pyrite that we are at a normal average price, but that this one has a little bit of upwards potential because we don't necessarily need a lot less pyrite in the game, and supply demand may take over decently quickly. I would say that a 20 ISK is not necessarily outside of the realm of possibilities. Of course, we'll need summer slump and all of that stuff to end as well, but I do think potentially pyrite has some more upwards potential, way more than titanium, which I do think will be stuck a little bit at that 4.5 ISK range because of the lower needs. But yeah, pyrite doing quite okay to defend that 18 ISK price range at the moment, and you can see here on any volumes we do have a little bit of an upwards spike happening. Then we have the Mexalon chart next. That is not looking as good when it comes to Mexalon defending its yearly average, but I think here it's important to mention that in my opinion and in my experience 75 ISK has always been a normal and good price for Mexalon. So starting the year at 100, then the whole period at 125 is definitely an incredibly high price for Mexalon. Then the April spike pushed us up to 200 ISK, and now we are declining quite substantially. Current sell price is at 65 ISK, buyers are coming in at 61.20. The story here I think is the uniqueness of Mexalon, which has made it the best mineral to mine for in HiSec for a very long time, is that it does become one of the bottlenecks very quickly in nullsec. And of course the industry changes have hit nullsec industry quite massively. And as a result, we have to give back quite a bit of that premium all of a sudden for Mexalon. But just like with pyrite, I'm reading this at the same in the same way that eventually I do think Mexalon prices are bound to become a little bit higher than what they are at the moment once we get into a more normal cycle of demand and supply. I would say that that 75 ISK historical average is definitely on the books here. After that, we've got the low-sec minerals. So here is the isogen chart, and that does start to look very interesting. What I've been mentioning for months and months and months at the moment seems to be happening with a little bit of upwards pressure on the chart, and we are seeing almost 59 ISK for the sellers, 53 for the buyers, and the pattern is returning here with 10 million. In fact, it's 50 million at 58.97. Another 10 million here at 59, but then we go to 63 for the next 15 million. And then 70.50 for the next 50 million. So the story here during these months, when isogen really failed to break out above 44-45 ISK, we were stuck with one massive sell order of 1.8 billion units that just pinned this market down and just never allowed it to go anywhere. I'm not sure if whoever is holding all of these isogen stocks listens to Eve Talk, but clearly once that order was gone and we had the April rush, the strategy has changed quite substantially. It could also be that we're finally starting to chew through some of these stocks and that the volumes start to make sense to go in with just smaller individual sell orders. But this is of course a strategy that in an upwards trend, and especially here in the isogen market, makes a lot of sense and will probably yield a lot better ISK than just to put everything in a single sell order, as they're slowly now building those prices up towards, well, who knows what it is going to be. But my read on the isogen market has been for a very long time that once we get through the historical stocks of isogen from the resource bonanza period, you could say, we are going to go up in price, as isogen is now something you have to get into low sec. And as a result, active supply against active demand is probably, quite a bit tighter than what we're seeing now at on the market, and as a result we can expect isogen prices to eventually go up quite substantially, but we do need to chew through those stocks. And this is also, I think, although this is speculation on my part, potentially one of the metrics that CCP is keeping an eye on. I have seen a couple of comments going for, didn't CCP promise us that the scarcity era would stop at one point? Didn't we get like the promise that eventually new ways for creating stuff into the game would be found. I think that is still the case, but it's definitely possible that CCP wants to first flush all of the old stuff through the system, and that means that the Isogen stocks will need to be pretty much depleted. We would need to get into a price discovery of active demand and active supply rather than having the old stocks keep the price artificially. You could say artificially, but keeping those prices in check and way lower than what they would normally be if all of a sudden all Isogen would disappear. And we would have to go on what's being produced now and what's being consumed now. I think you would look at a much higher price, which I think Noxium, for instance, is starting to show, because Noxium is moving down with everything else, which I think means that it is already tied to the current downtrend in demand, which is due to, again, the industry changes, summertime and all of that stuff. But look at where we are. We're still talking 1,320 ISK for the sellers, 1,280 ISK for the buyers. The most expensive Tech 1 mineral is now a low sec mineral, and we have these motions that basically move with the changes that are happening on the game. Compare that to Isogen, where during the resource scarcity, where for instance Tritanium actually did okay, but Pyrite went up, Mexalon actually went up in price. Isogen just never moved from that 45 ISK price range. It's only when the industry changes were announced that we finally managed to break through, and by that time that massive 1.8 billion sell order was gone as well. Here in Noxium, you've got a market that moves with demand, and I think that CCP may be waiting on that to happen across the board. Then we've got the nullsec minerals. Here is the Zydrine chart, and I think I just caught up to the previous recording. We're still below 1000 ISK, confirming that Noxium is the most expensive Tech 1 mineral at the moment, with 875 ISK for most sellers, 823 for the buyers. Same slump, very early peak in April with the industry changes, and then here we also have a period with very, very big volumes. We saw from the economic reports that a lot of mining happened in the region in nullsec, crashing the price down, and we're currently not able to get back to and above that 1000 ISK. I think eventually that may happen, but again, it is probably going to happen after the summertime, with more activity and potentially a little bit more need to actually actively make capital ships and things like that as things settle down. And I think we'll slowly start to see a little bit of capital reduction, more destruction than what's being produced at the moment, which may also be the aim from CCP, and which may also be a metric that they'll be looking at before opening up the spigots again on the resources. Then we've got Megasite continuing to hover around the 600 ISK mark, 588 to 598 for most sellers. So again, just below 600. Buyers are coming in at 572. This is again pretty average, and also one that feels a lot more pinned down. So I'm not sure if Megasite is still struggling with some sort of stocks out there. My theory though is that there's like some supply sources that are a bit more plentiful for Megasite than Zydrine, because we don't see these sell order volumes be as reversed as what we see, for instance, in the Isogen market. That's maybe a quick last note on that one again as well. Here is Mexalon, far closer probably to active supply, and so we're talking one sell order above, well, two sell orders here above 10 million, but 1 million, that's most of these sell orders. Then you move on to the Noxium chart, where the biggest sell orders are just a couple million units, and most of them are below 1 million. But then you go back to Isogen, that has a lot of sell orders above 10 million ISK, and that is a situation where Isogen should be between Mex and Noxium once we get to that active supply, active demand metric. And then finally we've got the Morphite chart that is still hovering at its high point, 88,000 to 89,000 to almost 90,000 ISK here for the sellers, 87,000 for the buyers. Super expensive. It is of course needed in a lot of stuff. Again, that one caveat that one warning. In one of the live streams, I did notice that I think it was like a CSM member that pointed this out to CCP and that potentially they'll be looking at it. So if there's one thing where you can expect resource, like an opening up for resources to happen first, I would say Morphyte is definitely a potential candidate, which could definitely reduce the price of Morphyte quite a little bit. And so I'm not sure if I would invest in it at the moment. Next up, we have the PI market that's coming in at 24.40. All right, let's go through these. As always, first of all, we've got the broadcast nodes, advanced PI materials. All right, a little bit of pressure, but after breaking 175 million on the chart again, that's kind of normal. Almost 1.7 million for the sellers, 1.6 for the buyers. It does seem like a lot of these advanced materials, PI materials that are now needed a little bit more in general industry, are still seeing that increased demand and are able to maintain their premium. Construction blocks was down last week and went down to a 1-year low point, trying to bounce up from that, but having a very hard time to do so. 8,000 for the sellers, 5,800 disc for the buyers. Despite some more sell orders trying to take advantage of this dip here, it is still a very, very low buy price. We're struggling with oversupply in the refined PI materials. And summertime is not going to help that. Consumer electronics confirming this trend, slow down trend as well to a 1-year low point pretty much. 5,600 now for the first seller for something that normally costs 12,500 disc. That is very low, and here you can clearly see that lack of demand at 5,500 for the first buyer. Fuel related PI materials, doing a little bit better. Coolant's able to maintain a price above 8,000 disc. That's only like a 20% less than the 10k average. 8,500 for the sellers, 7,500 for the buyers. Big margin there though, between sellers and buyers. So potentially we could go down very quickly on these as well, especially with the summer slump coming. Then we get cryoprotectant solutions confirming that trend, and now just daily averages and 5-day moving averages well below 100,000 disc. 97.5 for the first seller, 93,000 for the buyers. So these with the spikes here in at the beginning of the chart are tied to implants. Could be interesting investments. With that one warning, make sure that you can buy down the line as well, because at the moment we are definitely testing new lows when it comes to the lack of demand in PI, at least the base products. Enriched uranium, an exception to the rule, back to its normal average on one day of 12,500 disc. We're talking 12,000 for one seller, 12,640 for most, 9,700 for the buyers. Tied to fuels, definitely a little bit of a different dynamic here at the moment. Full recovery to, I would say, a normal price and close to a 1-year high point. Who would have thought we'd see that in PI? Integrity response drones pretty flat once we get back to those advanced PI materials. 1.7 million to 1.7 million for the buyers as well, just below that. So very nice, able to maintain that premium. Nice recovery on the increased demand. Mechanical parts bouncing back up to 7.5 or something like that on the chart. 7.7 for the sellers, 6.800 for the buyer. Still, a lack of demand is clearly shown, but once you get tied to fuels, you've got a little bit more consumption. I think that is keeping prices at least somewhat in check from crashing down like these consumer electronics, for instance. The nanites were testing lows, but made it back above 5k. Really? Yep, 5.3 for the sellers, 4,700 for the buyers. A couple of volume spikes here. I would not be surprised if we're talking investors that very smartly try to buy below 5,000 disc on the nanites. It is tied to implants. Nano factories, advanced PI flat again. There's not that much to say. 800,000 for the sellers, almost 800,000 for the buyers, showing that little bit of better demand that's happening here. Organic motor applicators, same story, actually going up for the week, back above 800k as well. 840 to 764. So pretty good, right? Away from that bottom by quite a little bit. In fact, a 1/3 increase in price, and even more at the moment, from 600,000 to well above 800,000. It is that advanced PI recovery due to the industry changes. Recursive computing modules staying above $1 million. Yep, 1.14 for the sellers, 1.1 for the buyers. Look at that narrow margin here, again showing that demand is decently good, even if the chart is not for recursive computing modules. Robotics tied to fuels, that one is still clearly struggling. Average historical price 100,000 disk, now selling for 61,000, buyers at 56,000. That is definitely not great. Then we get the self-harmonizing power cores, losing a little bit of ground at the moment, but still almost 1.7 million for the sellers. And look at this, what's happening here in the last 24 hours. Buyers back above 1.6 million as well. A little bit of competition here is clearly on the books, and same with Sterile Conduits, able to stay well above average for the year. 1.2 million almost for the sellers, 1.1 for the buyers. Our Yukomi superconductors for the implant bits are definitely pretty low. Are we buying below 60? Not yet. 68,000 for the sellers, 60,500 for the buyers. Slow buying here does make sense if you want to be ready for a potential implant announcement. And then the wetware mainframes confirming again, advanced PR materials doing a lot better. 175 million for the sellers and almost 1.7 million for the buyers. That story is still continuing. Our one exception, really surprise you could say, is enriched uranium. That is back on a historical average price all of a sudden, clearly on not that much supply anymore. Next up, advanced moon materials. That's coming in at 3040. Like that. And let's start with the carbides. As always, here is crystalline carbonite, slow pressure below 200 disk, but it's not that bad. 194 for the sellers, 186 for the buyers. We're still paying a massive premium. A little bit of supply is finding its way to the market because of these high prices. Then we've got the Caldari one, which is titanium carbide, also showing some pressure and meeting the Galente one around 200 ISK, 210 for the sellers and 202 for the buyers. That's definitely a little bit of a correction after playing with 300 ISK for the last couple of months. That should give Tech2 Caldari ships a little bit of breathing room, because this was a massive premium, double the price from the start of the year. Then we've got the Ferrite carbide for Minmetar. Alright, this one is definitely going back down to a slight premium of around 175 on the chart, 171 for the sellers, 165 for the buyers. So this is 3 for 3 for a definite pullback in price back to more historical averages. And then finally we've got tungsten carbide for Amar, that actually never moved up that much and is still at around 200 ISK with a little bit of pressure at the tail end. Sellers in fact coming in now at 190, 183 for the buyer. So a bit of pressure in the carbides. Metamaterials never really moved that much. Let's take a look at those next. Here is photonic metamaterials for the Galente production, still right at that 12.5k average for the year, or for most of the year you could say. 12,570 for the sellers, 11,100 for the buyers. A little bit of a gap opening up here, so some downwards pressure all of a sudden in these Tech2 based materials, but Galente was by far the cheapest compared to all of the others last week. So let's see what Caldari is doing. A bit of pressure, but still quite expensive. 22,700 to 23,000 for the sellers, 21,000 for the buyers. Much healthier margin here. That one is not moving anywhere, right around the average for the year. Then we've got the plasmonic metamaterials for Minmetar, right on 20k. And first sellers coming in just below that, 18k for the buyers. Bit more gap of gap opening up down here as well, but again pretty much average and normal. Then we've got Amar, finally terahertz metamaterials. Alright, yep, 17.5, there's not that much to say. It's 18.5 this week, 16.8 for the buyers. So this is again maybe a touch above average, but metamaterials really holding on quite nicely to their normal average ranges. So a little bit of downward pressure on the carbides should give Tech2 production a little bit of breathing room. The other advanced moon materials here is fermionic condensates. Slight pressure at the tail end, definitely trading below average. I think that's going to be the name of the game for most of these. Ferrogel again back below 35,000. Yeah, 34k for the sellers, 33.5 for the buyers. The pattern that we're seeing here is that you do see a little bit of volatility and higher prices all of a sudden, but any of those opportunities get filled very, very quickly with fresh supply, and thus we go back to those below average prices. Fluorides, again, back below 875. Here's the double opportunities, but supply very quickly finds its way, and now it's unable to break back above 1,000 disc. It's well below that, 824 for the sellers, 800 for the buyers. Definitely really cheap. Hypersynaptic fibers, same very, very high spike, 13,000 disc, but look at supply crashing us right back down to 10k, and now regular supply is just a little bit too much, and so we're down to 97. Nano transistors trying to get back up here, back to 5,000 disc. Yeah, for the sellers and for the buyers managed to do so. Honestly, this is an unusual one then, considering that most of the other spikes have been able to break out to well above 5k and 6,000 disc. But this may just be enough. If supply crushes this down back to a 4.6, 4.7 range, then yeah, that's going to be the story for the other advanced PI materials. Any increased prices, there's plenty of supplies and stocks out there ready to crush that very, very quickly, or to take advantage of that, of course. Then there's a couple of exceptions here, phenolic composites that did manage to have a more sustained premium due to the industry changes, but this one is also buckling here, went from a well above 2k down to 1,800 for the sellers, 1,500 for the buyers. It can change quite quickly. And then ceramic fibers, all right, able to somewhat defend its premium at 468 ISK, buyers at 446. That's a much narrower margin here, but lower volumes are threatening this as well, I think. So overall, advanced MU materials, probably tied to the summer slump as well, are seeing some downward pressure. Take two ships next, coming in at 36.10, like that. Let's go. And for this one, we'll take a look at what I'm actively doing. Haven't done that much last week, but we did pick up the Kitsune at 10.5 million. Osprey Navy issue, that's not happening just yet, but let's get started. Here is the Basilisk chart. At 230 million is where we are stalling the descent. That's right in the middle. Unfortunately, that's not where I would want to make a move. 239 million for the sellers, 206 for the buyers, and you can see my trade here. Managed to buy for 200 including taxes, so definitely too early. Both the chart and the price ranges is telling us that. Then we've got the Cerberus. That's potentially a little bit more interesting, definitely reaching the bottom that we had here, and we're well below the 250 on the chart. 238 for the sellers, 220 for the first couple of buyers. Get rid of these two, get us to that 215. You'd see a much better chart that's playing with this one, with this range, and that's where we move in. So still a little bit too early in my book, but any more supply and a couple of like a dozen sellers that don't have the patience and are willing to get that 6 million premium on the other buyers, and we are looking at a buy opportunity for the Cerberus, definitely worth keeping an eye on. Then we've got the Guardian that finally showed some volatility in a Namar one as well, and very quickly back down to less than 200 million, 211 for the sellers, 181 million for the buyers. I would say if you want to take a gamble looking at this chart as well, you may be just too late, but try and buy a Guardian as close as possible to 180 million. It does make sense. And yeah, if we take away the less than 24 hours, we get down to this. And that was probably just 24 or 3 days ago. You could have put up a buy order below 180 million. That was definitely the right time to try and make that happen, as we were pushing down on all of that supply. Right now, unfortunately, you're a little bit too late, but there's definitely still a trade in there, considering the premium between sellers and buyers. Then we've got the Hound. Not good news if you're looking to invest. Flat above 30 million is here. 31 for the sellers, 29 for the buyers. Very narrow margin at a pretty high price on this chart. So that's no for buying. Do I have that? No. So I bought for less than 25 million, including taxes. We are clearly not there yet. Ichthyorsa for the Triglavian perspective. All right, back below 800 million. Interesting. 808 for the sellers, 710 for the buyers. That's definitely good news if you're looking for potentially a little bit more Triglavian supply and slightly better prices. Then we get the Ishtar. I made a move on this one, so you can clearly see that we're forming a bottom again. We're breaking out. We're not going to reach this, the 200 million on the chart, but I bought an Ishtar for 206 million, including taxes. It's up now to 230 million for the sellers and 204 for the buyers. I think you can get very close to matching my buy, but it may be a lot harder all of a sudden to grab it, as you can see that the chart is starting to move back up on the average prices. So a lot more patience all of a sudden in the sellers as we have made this bottom here on the chart. But yeah, this is one that I bought as well. Ishtar at 206. I think we're already looking at a small profit if I were to sell now, but obviously I'd be hoping for a 250. That'd be great news. If not, well, it's an Ishtar, and I love to fly the Ishtar. Then we've got the Manticore. More bad news if you're looking for buy opportunities. We're back well above 30 million, 32 for the sellers, 27 for the buyers, and I bought one for 27 million including taxes. So I'm definitely, the buyers have gone up above what I managed to do. Then we get the Munin looking a little bit more interesting on the chart, getting back towards 200 million on the downside, 220 for the sellers and 193 million for the buyers. The bad news for the Munin is always the volumes. That is not that great, but if you're looking for a Tech 2 investment, I would say that the Munin is definitely in an interesting spot. Nemesis still well above 25 million, 27 for the sellers, 23 for the buyers. Yeah, I don't know. I think I would wait for a bit more of a breakdown and get that chart close to 22.5. Buyers maybe at around 20. That's like a no-brain right now. I mean, there's a gap, right? There's definitely a gap here between sellers and buyers, but this is the right time to jump in. The chart definitely says it's too early. Onero's going back down very interestingly again here as well. Look at this previous bottom right here and then a high up to 230 and above. We're down to 193.5 for the sellers and 161 million for the buyers. Let's see if we can get that to show up on the chart. That's all the way down here. That's all the way down here again. Yeah, again, if you're looking for that investment, if you have to, get out of cash, then the Onero's looks very interesting as well. Again, that same morning, 12.5 a day. It's I would never do more than one Onero's at a time. Then we've got the Panther, which is one of these Black Ops battleships that we talked about at the beginning of EVE Talk, with the changes that have pushed the prices up, of course, and the volumes as well, to well above 1.75 billion at one point. Getting back down very quickly though, below 1.5 billion for the sellers, way more supply than demand at 1.35 billion. So this is, I mean, I think I covered it in one of my videos, I'm not sure anymore, but this is one where I'm really curious. I think that the Marauders got such big buffs, and because they're PvE mission ships, their premium is way more sustained than what I think these Black Ops battleships are going to end up doing. Then we've got the Purifier, unfortunately, back up again above 30 million, 32 for the sellers, 28 for the buyers. That is definitely not in buy range. Then the Scimitar is going back down substantially all of a sudden as well. So again, look at that bottom here and what's happening here. Below 200 million for the sellers, 180 for the first buyer. Yeah, well, it's same story, right? Volumes are pretty low. You could try to buy a Scimitar. I think it's the least attractive one of the ones that we've seen so far though. Then we've got the Widow, Black Ops battleship, so another CCP spike up to 2 billion, and this one is holding on a little bit better to its premium, above 1.5 billion for the sellers, 1.4 billion for the buyers, a little bit more buyers compared to sellers as well. So this one is doing slightly better. And then finally we've got the Zealot that is hovering still above 200 million, buyers at 191. It's that same story. It's not perfect, but if you really want to, you could try an aggressive buy order. Next up, maybe I'll quickly take a quick look at my holdings. No, we'll do that after the Tech 3 ships on this one. I'm still trying to find that pattern, but yeah, Tech 3 next. Give me a moment to drink. At 43.50. So let's take a look at that here. The confessor finally stemming the bleeding, staying above 40 million on average, 43 million for the sellers, 35.6 million for the buyers. And I bought one for 35 million, including the taxes. Then we've got the Hecate also stopping its descent, but at a slightly higher price, 47 million for the sellers and 41 million for the buyers. Supply-wise, last 24 hours, just 2 sell orders. That's not that much. Confessor last 24 hours, that's just 10 ships, so that's not that much. With a bit of luck, we could go back up in price, but I mean, they've surprised me with this 1 month long downtrend here. The Jackdaw, and that's not good news. Probably where we'll see more supply. Yeah, lost 24 hours, not that much anymore, but this is 40 ships almost. And then we've got 88 days, that's still quite a lot as well, with demand completely slumped. Unfortunately, they're still at 39 million for the buyer, so that margin is still not there, but this is a massive contraction as well, heading back toward 40 million ISK. And you know, there's not really a lot of reason to make a lot of Jackdaws. That means more supply for the Hecate and the Confessor potentially. Not good news, or well, if you like to fly these ships, they're pretty cheap at the moment. With this Zwepel doing a surprise breakout. Who the hell would have thought that? But looks like big purchases, so must be Nosec related, bringing this Zwepel up to 54 million ISK for the sellers, 43 for the buyers. This should grab a lot of supply in the upcoming weeks. That's the good news, but very difficult market to actually read when you're looking for higher prices, which is what I'm looking for, of course, since I bought that Confessor at 35 million ISK. But all of the, what I would say, generally considered to be most popular one, I think because they're slightly better in PvE across the board here, especially the Jackdaw, are down in price. Not a lot of supply, despite the fact that they're down in price to close to 40 million ISK. And then the Zwepel is doing a surprise jump, and that could give us a little bit of breathing room, but for the same at the same time, this could get plugged very quickly as well, considering it's only one of the ships and it's the least popular one. And so you're not going to see a constant PvE demand for the Zwepel either, I don't think. As a result, I'm not sure if I would bet on the Zwepel jump here, causing increased prices for the Confessor, Hecate and Jackdaw just yet. It could be that we'll just settle at around 40 million for all of these ships across the board. Then for the cruisers, here is the Legion. All right, this is another CCP spike. You know, that was very difficult to actually predict, since CCP is now going to remove the skill point cost once you lose one of these Tech 3 cruisers. That should definitely increase their popularity. So here's the volume from 180 million average to 220 for the sellers, 193 for the buyers. Big spike. Loki, same thing. Loki, in fact, most popular tactical cruiser. One of the only ships, I think, in the game that has bonuses for both armor and shields. So there's the volumes. There is the price spike from 180 million to 231. Had I known, right, I could have bought for 161, sold at 231. But this is an unpredictable CCP event that has caused this. Then we get the Proteus. There's the spike here as well, going up to 213 million as well. And finally the Tengu at 200 million. Actually, the most I think one of the most popular PvE cruisers, having a rather limited boost all of a sudden compared to all of the others. So 200 million for this one, then the Proteus up to 213, the Loki up to 230, and the Legion up to 218. Yeah, Tengu still the cheapest Tech 3 cruiser. That's a little bit of a surprise, but overall, of course, it's the CCP event for Tech 3 cruisers on the forum post, I believe it is, that announced the removal of the skill point cost in one of the upcoming patches. We're not sure, I don't think, when exactly that is going to hit. Then before we hit the extra product, I'll quickly take a look at you know, what I've been doing for investments. It's mostly been ships anyway, so you can see here all these buyers for the Osprey Navy issue up to 68 million. So I need Kaldari faction warfare to really beat everyone to a pulp, get all that LP in and crash the price back down so that my buy order can trigger. Would be great, but at the moment that's not happening. A little bit of stalling on that descent is causing havoc. On the other hand, I have a confessor that I bought for 35 million, sellable at 43. I'm hoping for better prices, but I wouldn't bet on it in the short term. Still, potentially, you can see from the price history that a 45 to 50 million price range is possible for the confessor, so I'm definitely holding on to that one. Then I got an endurance 19.5 is I think flattening out here. Yeah, and that's the question. Will we see more of these spikes or not? So I bought an Ishtar at 206. That one is already starting its ascent. How quickly will that go? Not sure, but we're at 230, so I could take a small profit on that at this point as well. Then we've got that Kitsune that triggered, a little bit of surprise, but it triggered 20.5 including taxes, as we are really flat here for a couple of weeks. This is a pattern in Tech2 ships that we don't see very often, where a reduction in price on more supply is actually sustained for like 10 days, and even an aggressive buy order, I think at below 20 million, just below 20 million, or just above 20 million, I'm not exactly sure, is eventually triggered a couple of weeks in, like a week in or something like that, because the supply just kept coming in. So I think this is a good buy. We're not looking at profits just yet, but looking at the chart, the potential is definitely there. Then I got one Manticore at 27 million. Again, it's up to 32, 27 for the buyers. So a slight profit, but it's too early. And then I bought a Prospect at 21, and that was too early because now sellers are below 20 million ISK, buyers at 18.4. You can definitely do better than what I bought, but the potential right here on the chart is clearly there as well. So that's it. I don't have any active sell orders at the moment. That was my stuff. And then for the extra product, I'm going to make it pretty easy on this one. We're going to take a quick look at the fuel blocks at 50.55. Like that. So let's get started. Helium fuel blocks flat above 25,000 on this 1 year chart. Nice little premium, 27,000 for the sellers, 25,000 for the buyers. Hydrogen fuel blocks very much in the same range. Yep, 27 for the sellers, 25 for the buyers. Nitrogen fuel blocks 26 to 24, so a little bit cheaper. And then oxygen fuel blocks 27 to 25. Very, very uniform prices here in the fuel blocks, but the chart is of course the interesting bit, where I think that the industry changes have brought some more sustained increased demand for fuel blocks. We of course need way more reactions since there's a lot more in the game right now, and fuel blocks are actually a small part of the industry cost as well for some of the bigger items. And as a result, this is the reason why we've got a nice little boost in average price here from, well, almost 15,000 ISK, let's say 16, 17,000, up to a 27,000 for the sellers. Very nice increase in value here. That's sustainable and is also good news for PI, since most of my production is tied around fuel-related PI materials, and that is the one gamble that I always took. On the one hand, you get a lot less volatility, but way more consistent demand and consumption of your items, which, you know, at the moment is of course the right choice. Summertime is here, so you can expect that lower demand across the board in the EV economy is part of reality, but yeah, just like with like a stock market or something like that, when everyone is running for the exit and making massive posts on the subreddit about you know, how terrible the stock market / EVE Online is at the moment, that's when you know, those that can stick it out actually have incredible opportunities to get ahead of the game. That's it for this EVE Talk, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.